Cement, sweat and silence. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when Miguel arrived at the construction site, his boots crunching against gravel still cool from the night. He was always first, had been for 30 years. In the blue dark of pre-dawn, the skeletal frame of what would become a 40-story luxury tower stood like a giant's ribcage against the sky. He didn't need light to find his way. His hands knew the texture of every surface, the rough kiss of unsanded wood, the cold promise of rebar, the gritty truth of cement. This was his 5th high-rise in the city, and though the buildings grew taller and the blueprints more complex, the fundamentals remained unchanged. Cement, sweat, silence. The silence was Miguel's favorite part. In another hour, the site would erupt. Jackhammers shrieking, cement mixers churning their gravelly songs, men shouting over the chaos. But now, in these stolen moments before the world woke, the silence held a quality almost sacred. He could hear his own breath, the distant hum of the city beginning to stir, and sometimes, if he listened carefully enough, the whisper of the building itself, telling him what it wanted to become. By 6, the crew arrived. Young Carlos came first, earbuds dangling, carrying coffee in a paper cup that Miguel knew cost more than he'd ever spend on such a thing. Then Roberto and his cousin, the Korean brothers whose names Miguel had finally learned to pronounce correctly, old Santos with his bad knee and worse jokes, and a rotating cast of day laborers whose faces blurred together season after season. They didn't talk much, these men. Oh, there were the necessary exchanges. Hand me that level. Watch your head. Break in 10. But beneath the functional dialogue lay a deeper silence, a mutual understanding that needed no words. They spoke in shared glances, in the synchronization of effort, in the way Miguel could read exhaustion in the slope of a man's shoulders or determination in the set of his jaw. The cement mixer started its rotation at 7 sharp, that familiar grinding rhythm that would be the heartbeat of their day. Miguel watched the dry powder meet water, transforming into something new, something with purpose. There was poetry in it, he thought, though he'd never say so aloud. Dust becoming stone, liquid becoming foundation, every shovelful a small act of creation. By noon, sweat had soaked through Miguel's shirt. The sun, no longer a gentle suggestion on the horizon, beat down with August fury. He worked on the 23rd floor, a platform of plywood and prayer beneath his feet. The city spread out below like a map of everyone else's dreams. Up here, the wind carried voices from the street, fragments of other people's conversations about things that seemed impossibly distant. Dinner plans, weekend trips, someone's birthday. Miguel poured cement into wooden forms that would hold until the mixture decided to become permanent. This was the magic he could never quite explain to his daughter, who worked in an office downtown clicking buttons on a computer. How could he describe the moment when liquid became solid, when possibility became certainty? How cement remembered the shape you gave it, held that memory forever. She'd asked him once when she was small why he didn't talk more at home. He tried to explain that after a day of cement dust coating his throat, of machinery drowning out thought, silence felt like water to a thirsty man. But he saw the confusion in her eyes and settled for kissing her forehead instead, leaving the question unanswered. The afternoon stretched long and brutal. Carlos stumbled, caught himself, cursed softly. Miguel steadied him with one hand, said nothing. The boy nodded gratitude, and they returned to work. This too was their language, the unspoken agreement to watch out for one another, to be the net beneath each other's missteps. At 3 o'clock, Santos sat heavily during break, rubbing his knee. The silence around him was different, not peaceful but painful, filled with the understanding that his body was betraying him, that soon he'd be too broken for this work. Miguel sat beside him, didn't ask about the knee, just shared his water bottle. Sometimes presence was more than enough. The building rose around them, floor by floor, week by week. Miguel knew he'd never live here, never even visit once it was complete. These towers were for other people, people who'd ride smooth elevators to apartments with views they took for granted. They'd never think about the men who'd poured the floors beneath their feet, never consider the silence and sweat that preceded their comfort. But Miguel didn't build for gratitude. He built because it was what he knew, because there was honor in transforming raw materials into shelter, because every building was a testament to human will. Long after he was gone, this structure would remain, his hands in every column, his effort in every floor. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Miguel stood back to survey the day's work. Fresh cement, still dark with moisture, filled the forms they'd prepared. Tomorrow it would be harder. Next week, harder still. Eventually, it would bear weight that seemed impossible. Floors and walls and furniture and lives built upon this foundation. The crew packed up their tools in the familiar silence of exhaustion. Cement dust had settled into every crease and pore, a second skin Miguel wore home each evening. His muscles ached in ways that had become so constant he only noticed their absence on Sundays. Walking to his truck, Miguel paused and looked up at what they'd built. In the dying light, the building looked almost beautiful in its incompleteness, honest in its exposure. Soon it would be clad in glass and steel, made respectable for the city's gaze. But right now it was still theirs, cement and sweat and silence made solid. He drove home as the city lit up around him, carrying the quiet in his bones.